All right, let's dive in. Today, we're tackling David Goggins.
Oh yeah, Goggins. Intense guy.
You know him, the ultramarathon runner, ex-Navy SEAL.
Yeah, the motivational powerhouse. Big on mental toughness.
That's him. Our listener wants to understand his approach to self-improvement.
Right, pushing limits, embracing the suck, all that.
Exactly. We've got this YouTube video they sent in.
Oh, perfect. So we're doing a Goggins deep dive then.
Full deep dive. This video, it's classic Goggins, straight to the point.
No nonsense, that's for sure.
He comes out swinging, saying our brain is our most powerful weapon.
Makes sense. It's all about mindset, right?
He goes even further. Says, and I quote, "Your brain is the most powerful weapon in the world. But there's 24 hours in the day where you're alone in this brain, and your brain is talking to you in all kinds of ways, and it wants to control you."
Wow. Whoa. Talk about a wake-up call.
Right. So how do we even begin to unpack that?
Well, he's highlighting that inner dialogue we all have, that constant chatter. But he's not just saying, be mindful. He's saying, you got to take control, dominate it.
Not just listen to it,
Yeah.
but actively shape it.
Exactly. He's all about choosing your thoughts, not letting them run wild.
Okay, so how do you even do that? I mean, where do you start?
He gives some pretty wild examples in this video.
Oh, yeah, like the one about struggling in school. He couldn't understand a single paragraph, right?
Yeah, that one. And then he finds this crazy strategy, writing things out over and over and over.
Like 100 times. Just insane repetition.
It sounds nuts, but there's a method to it. It's called spaced repetition, actually. You basically force your brain to remember by repeating things at certain intervals.
So like flashcards almost. Make your brain work for it.
Exactly. It strengthens those neural pathways, helps you learn faster. Teachers have been using this for years, but Goggins, he takes it to a whole new level.
Totally. He even applied it to learning to swim, right? Kept going back to the pool, repeating the same motions until it clicked.
Yep. It's about that grit, that relentless determination to keep going, even when it's hard.
Which, let's be honest, just showing up is sometimes the hardest part.
No argument there.
But then Goggins takes his whole hard work idea and applies it to everything. He talks about growing up in this tiny rundown house. That was his normal for a while.
Oh, right. And then his family moved to a better place, right? He never wanted to go back to that old house.
But then later on, he realized something. Going back to that difficult environment actually reset his idea of what hardship even was.
Like, it recalibrated his definition of tough. That's fascinating.
Yeah. And he took that same mindset into Navy SEAL training, which, as we all know, is brutal.
Yeah.
He basically told himself, this is my new normal. This is it.
Broken bones, stress fractures, all of it. He embraced it.
It's wild. At one point, he even compares himself to the devil. He says, I love God, but for a short period of time, I became the devil because that was hell.
Chilling, right? Wow. That gives you a glimpse into his headspace during that time. Total immersion in the challenge.
So is that the key, to just completely lean into the difficulty?
Well, there's actually some psychology behind that. When we put ourselves in tough situations on purpose, it can build resilience. Therapists use this idea all the time.
Oh, right. Like exposure therapy.
Yeah.
To help with phobias and things like that.
Exactly. So maybe Goggins is onto something with his intensity.
Okay, but here's the big question. Is this even healthy in the long run? Where's the line between pushing yourself and just self-destruction?
That's a really good point. It's a fine line for sure.
He also talks about this other thing in the video, working his old job, thinking he was giving 100%, but later realizing he was nowhere near his true potential. He even says, I thought then, making $1,000 a month, I thought that was me at my 100% potential. Coming to find out a few years later, I wasn't even near that.
Man, that's relatable. We all have those moments where we wonder, am I really giving it my all?
Yeah, it's like he's saying we all have these hidden reserves of energy and capability just waiting to be tapped into. Have you ever felt like that? Like you were holding back, not reaching your full potential? What do you think holds us back?
It's a question we all grapple with, right? What are we really capable of? Goggins thinks most of us settle because we like comfort. We stay in our safe zones.
He doesn't sugarcoat it either. He actually says comfort can be the enemy of growth.
He does, yeah. He's all about embracing the suck, the struggle. That's where real change happens, he says.
And that ties into his idea of finding peace, which is kind of surprising. He's not talking about bubble baths and meditation retreats.
No, not quite. Goggins thinks true peace, real peace, comes from facing your challenges head on, pushing past what you think your limits are, holding yourself accountable, always.
So finding peace through suffering doesn't sound very peaceful.
I know, right? But there's a logic to it. Think about how good it feels to finish something really tough, overcome an obstacle.
That I did it feeling.
Yeah, that sense of accomplishment, that's a kind of peace, isn't it?
He even says that he didn't love himself, even when other people did. Like, external validation wasn't enough.
He's big on that. You got to find that inner peace yourself. Nobody else can give it to you.
And that takes, what? Lots of introspection, like getting to know your own mind.
For sure. Goggins is all about understanding your weaknesses, your triggers, the stuff that messes with your head. He talks about learning to control his thoughts, almost like training them, like a muscle.
So it's mental discipline, not just physical endurance. But how do we even start doing that?
Well, first, got to pay attention to that self-talk. What are the negative thoughts you keep having? Putting yourself down, doubting yourself, all that.
Once you see the pattern, then what?
Then you start pushing back. Instead of, I can't do this, it becomes, I'm going to figure this out.
So change the script from limitation to, like, empowerment.
Exactly. And this is where Goggins' thing about repetition and hard work comes back in. It's not just for your body, it's for your mind. Training your mind to be tough, to keep going when things are rough.
But, I mean, not everyone's going to be a Navy SEAL, right? Or run ultramarathons. How do we apply this to, like, regular life?
Good point. It's about those small chances every day to push ourselves a little. Step outside the comfort zone.
Give me an example.
Could be simple stuff. Trying a new hobby, learning a skill, or finally having that hard conversation you've been avoiding.
So not just physical challenges, mental and emotional ones too.
Exactly. Instead of seeing a challenge as something to avoid, see it as a chance to grow.
Easier said than done, right? How do you make that mental switch?
Goggins uses visualization. He'd picture himself overcoming stuff, feeling the pain, the exhaustion, but then the win at the end.
Mental rehearsal, like athletes do.
Yeah. And there's science behind it. It can actually activate the same parts of your brain as if you were really doing the thing.
So if you see yourself doing it, your brain starts to believe it. Wild. But sometimes the hardest part is starting. Any Goggins wisdom for that?
He's got this radical idea, the 40% rule. Basically, he says we only use about 40% of our true potential.
So when we think we're maxed out, we're actually not even close.
Nope. Goggins says we have way more endurance and resilience than we realize. He calls it callousing the mind. By pushing past our limits over and over, we build mental toughness. Like getting calluses on your hands from hard work.
The more you do it, the less it hurts.
Basically, yeah. But of course, there's got to be a limit, right?
Right. How do we know when we're pushing too far?
Got to be self-aware. Listen to your body, your mind. If you're always wiped out, feeling resentful, that's a sign to maybe back off a little.
Find that balance between pushing and respecting your limits.
Exactly. And it's different for everyone. Goggins' thing isn't about copying him exactly. It's about those core principles. Mental toughness, self-awareness, pushing yourself. But you got to apply them in a way that works for you.
So, not becoming David Goggins, but finding your own version of that strength and resilience. And maybe getting a little uncomfortable along the way.
It's a journey, for sure. Not always going to be easy. But as Goggins would say, stay hard.
So we've covered a lot. Goggins' belief in the mind's power, hard work, repetition, and his unique way of finding peace. But let's go back to something we mentioned earlier. The downsides of this whole no pain, no gain thing.
Right. It's something to think about. Pushing yourself is powerful, but it's got to be healthy and sustainable, too. Goggins has gotten some criticism for, like, glorifying suffering, pushing self-denial too far.
So how do we balance pushing our limits with, not burning ourselves out?
Got to be honest with yourself. Why are you pushing so hard? Is it for growth, or are you just trying to prove something? Do your goals actually align with what you care about?
It's easy to get caught up in the hype.
It is. What works for Goggins might not work for everyone, and that's fine.
Totally. So approach his ideas carefully. Take what fits for you, adapt it, and always, always look after your mental and physical health.
It's about finding that sweet spot between challenge and self-care. Pushing yourself, but knowing when to rest. Being relentless, but also kind to yourself.
And that brings us back to the big question. What are we truly capable of?
Maybe the answer isn't just about what we achieve, but how we discover our potential. That whole process of learning and growing.
It's about the journey, the resilience we build, the self-awareness we gain.
And maybe that's where the real peace is.
Okay, folks, we've done our Goggins deep dive, his intense philosophy, his unique way of looking at life.
We talked about hard work, repetition, the power of the mind, and his, different approach to finding peace.
Before we wrap up, though, one last thought. It's easy to, fixate on the extreme stuff, right? But what really sticks with me is that Goggins makes you think. Like, really question what you think you're capable of.
Yeah, for sure. It's not about becoming some kind of Goggins clone, you know?
Yeah,
It's about realizing that we all have that potential, that
yeah.
strength inside. We all have that voice telling us to stay comfy, play it safe. Goggins just wants us to, like, fight back.
Push past those limits we set for ourselves. And that goes for anything, right? Work, relationships, even just our daily habits.
Totally. It's about building that toughness, that discipline to stick with it, even when it's hard. Embrace the struggle, because that's where you grow, right?
So, to wrap up our deep dive here, I got to ask you, the listener, what's one area in your life where you're holding back? Where could you use a little more, I don't know, discomfort, challenge?
It doesn't have to be huge. It could be like starting a new workout routine, finally doing that creative thing you've been thinking about, or just speaking up more, you know?
Find those spots where you're settling. And then, like Goggins would say, get after it.
Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about making progress. Just showing up, putting in the work, even when it sucks. See what you can actually do.
So take a page from Goggins. The hard work, the discipline, being self-aware, you might surprise yourself.
And if you mess up, who cares? Setbacks happen. It's not failing, it's learning. It's about getting back up stronger.
Yeah, good point. It's that resilience, that grit to keep going when it's rough.
And as we finish up here, one last thing to think about. You're not alone in this. We all face stuff. Doubts, setbacks. But if you build that inner strength, that mental toughness, you can get through it. You can do amazing things.
Well said. And that's our deep dives into the world of David Goggins. We hope you got something out of it, inspiration, some new ideas, maybe even a little push. Remember, it's not about becoming Goggins. It's about finding your way to push your limits and see what you're really made of. So go out there, embrace the challenge, and thanks for joining us on the deep dive.